Gotham City is declaring war on Batman. What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and we are back with Matt Fraction's Batman run in the main DC universe. And this opens up with a bit of a speech from Batman, and he says, "Barbara and I have been talking. It's time to change tactics." And he says, Vandal Savage and his tactical urban combat officers are coming for us. He has the approval and support of Mayor Isley, City Hall, and the DA's office. They've been ordered to shoot on sight and will raid every bunker that we have that they can find. There are more of them than there are of us, and more bunkers than we can clear. So tonight, we are going to lose. Over the next 12 hours, the goal is to minimize that loss. Each of you has a wish list of items that we cannot risk falling into the Gotham Police Department's hands. Damian will run defensive interference in case any of you get cornered. And he says Oracle will direct you from the clock tower around Gotham City PD movement. If you're in danger of capture, ditch your bag and run. Once you've recovered your objectives, trip the poison pills and get the hell out. Deliver what you can to Father Michael at the Order of St. Dumas. His order has agreed to house our equipment temporarily. My objective will take me out of the immediate field of action, but I will be around. Suit up. We start in an hour, so good luck, don't get caught, and trust the plan. So what's going on here? Right? What in the world is going on here? You got Mayor Isley, Gotham City's going to war against Batman. What is the deal? Okay, so technically this is issue number 9. We're gonna jump back for a second and we're gonna talk about issue number 8 because that sets the stage for everything. And the first thing that I wanna draw your attention to is Poison Ivy becoming mayor of Gotham. So this actually doesn't happen in the Batman comics. This happens in the Poison Ivy comic. Yes, the comic's fantastic, and the arc where she runs for mayor is probably the best one so far. The idea behind it is that Poison Ivy is all about the green, right? She's able to channel it, control it. She's very much about the environment and plant life. What she ends up realizing is that while there are effects due to AI data centers and whatnot on the environment, she wants to do something about it. But the problem is that operating as a criminal lands her front and center with Vandal Savage, as we know, the commissioner of the Gotham City Police Department. The problem with this is that because she's kind of press-ganged into it, in the sense that we'll go after Harley if you don't do what we tell you to, she ultimately ends up in jail when she attacks the assistant of Vandal Savage. And that's when she decides to run for mayor, because she realizes the only way to really affect change in a meaningful way in the city of Gotham is to become a part of the powers that be, and to be the one who makes those decisions. The problem with this is that the road to hell is paved with good intentions, and that's one of the things that we're gonna see over this tidbit. But the funny thing about this is that even where Vandal Savage had been abusive towards Poison Ivy, the reality here is that now he's really approaching her in need of her assistance, right? He needs her help with all these goals. That's why I say the road to hell is paved with good intentions, because the reality is she's seemingly going into this trying to make Gotham City better, if for nothing other than the effect that it would have on the environment, data centers, different things like that. But more so than any of this, the reason why it's paved with good intentions is because of the message that Vandal Savage pitches. He says, the Batman and the cult-like gang of acolytes and anarchists that act in his name impede the very transformations the people of Gotham elected you to enact by eroding their good faith in justice. Lawlessness in the name of the law is still an act of lawlessness. Crime committed in the name of justice taints that justice all the same. And there is truth to that statement. There's a reason why legal doctrines like fruit of the poisonous tree exist, right? If cops bust into your house, violate your civil liberties, and then that evidence is used to indict you, that evidence can be thrown out because your civil liberties were violated, meaning the evidence is no longer usable. So there is truth to the statement that a crime committed in the name of justice taints that justice all the same. What's interesting here is that Vandal Savage is talking out of both sides of his mouth. We know historically he's a bad guy, which is why it was a shock to all of us when he became the commissioner of the Gotham City Police Department. We knew there was some kind of nefarious intent behind his motivations. On the surface, it looks like going after Batman, but there's going to be some much bigger questions that come up here, because what ends up happening is you switch over to Batman himself when he ends up meeting with Alan Scott, the Green Lantern. Now, one of the things to know about Alan Scott is he is the original Green Lantern in DC Comics, publication-wise, but Batman meeting with him is also for a very particular reason, because Alan Scott asks him, so why this, right? Why are we here getting a cup of coffee? And Batman's just kind of like, I mean, is it really that weird that Batman likes a cup of coffee? I mean, it makes sense. This is one of the great things about Matt Fraction writing. He will oftentimes take characters and toss them into scenarios that you wouldn't normally see them in. Of course, we have had great moments where we learn that Batman eats a hamburger with a knife and a fork, but it is still an awesome moment in Matt Fraction's run. But that's where you really find out the motivation behind Bruce Wayne being here. And honestly, it's actually him being pretty humble, right? He says, I swear, I'm not trying to be difficult. I know I can be arrogant, manipulative, difficult, aloof, and Alan's just like, opaque. That's what I find you. I find you to be opaque. And Batman just says, you're right, I am. And this is me trying. So why this? I'll tell you, I wanted the folks of this neighborhood who feel forgotten and ignored to see me. They are not forgotten and they are not ignored. It's a pretty big moment, right? Bruce Wayne shows up as Batman in a coffee shop to remind the people in this part of town, just because you don't see me all the time doesn't mean you're forgotten by me. It's a pretty profound moment when you think about it. And he says, I wanted those Axe Gang guys that tried to roll you to see me too. They are not forgotten. And you sure as hell show that they're not ignored, because there were a handful of guys from a gang that tried to rob Alan Scott. Imagine that, being foolish enough to try to rob a Green Lantern. But he says, most of all, I wanted them to see me, seeing them right back and not going anywhere. And that's where Alan asks them, like, who are you talking about? And Batman says, situational awareness, Green Lantern, them, because there's a cop right out there, which is really Batman saying, I want Gotham City Police Department to know I'm not worried about them. Because the reality is that in the events leading up to this war, one of the things that we've learned is that Vandal Savage has had it out for Batman for quite some time. All he was looking for was the right person to be in the right political position to grant him what he needed to instigate his war. Hence, him allying himself with Pamela Isley, Poison Ivy. And that's where Alan looks over and says, you've got yourself a Vandal Savage problem. And Batman says, something big is happening in Gotham. I don't know entirely what yet or how it all connects, but I know enough to know that when I don't know something, I should be humble enough to ask to be taught by someone who is smarter and wiser. So, Alan Scott, Green Lantern, will you teach me? Because yes, I have a huge Vandal Savage problem. And that's when you switch over to Savage talking to Poison Ivy. And again, this kind of feeds into that slippery slope. And he says, I'm asking to avail myself of all legal levers in these corridors of power to declare decisively once and for all, Gotham City does not need, want, or condone the Bat. And Poison Ivy asks him, is that so? Is that really all you're shooting for? Now, do not be fooled by Poison Ivy in this situation, and it's dope the way that she's handled. Sure, 99% of the time, Poison Ivy is just some girl in a Batman comic fighting Batman because the environment is being mistreated, and so she wants to see something done about it, and she's taking it on herself to take care of that. Otherwise, she's in a relationship with Harley Quinn doing whatever she does there. But just because she's oftentimes not treated as a serious villain in Batman comics, given the level of power she has and the experience under her belt, does not mean she's some kind of a fool. And Matt Fraction handles this perfectly. The very fact that she asks, is that so? Those three words hit at the very idea that Poison Ivy knows who Vandal Savage is, and she knows there's a lot more going on here than he initially leads her to believe. But he says, we two exotics find ourselves now in a land of laws, or so it tells itself. So be it. Let us move among the lawful and execute our vision via their methods, needlessly bureaucratic as they may be. After all, as they say, one catches more flies with honey. So it's him meeting her on her level and saying, look, we both commit crimes in the name of greater deeds. Your deeds may be different than mine, and my motivations may be different than yours. But the fact is, we do what we feel like we need to do. We're not that dissimilar you and I. And he says that a little bit more. He says, I pay no mind to the surface details of this moment, these clothes, this office, all of it will be gone in the blink of an eye. He says, I see in you the same sort of ancient wisdoms that course through me. Whatever strange twists of fate or designs of destiny brought us to this moment, we carry within us the memories of lifetimes. Thus, our goals are sanctioned and more righteous in ways that those burdened with but one life will never understand. Lawless, lawful, who cares how we see them? All that matters is the work of victory, and we both know not to mistake the condition of winning for its permanence. And I believe victory for us both is now very much at hand, mutual, beneficial, and at long last, eternal. This is a beautiful moment here, right? Because she responds, as she says, eternal as my perception may be, Savage, my albeit brief political experience has already taught me every favor has an equal and opposite favor. So in other words, Mr. Commissioner, what's in it for me? That's why I say she's no fool here, and tapping into the green gives her the history of the green, right? She knows the history of the world and all things that have happened therein. Vandal Savage is thousands of years old, so he's kind of feeding on that, right? The idea that they've been around for a long time, and that at the end of the day, from his perspective, the only thing that really matters is that they win. It's that they prove to be successful. All the failures will be forgotten unless they're failures of some extreme degree that history requires that people be reminded of them. But it's a really cool exchange between them, because then at that point, you jump back to Batman. And Batman in his conversation with Alan Scott says, you tangled with him first. Out of all of us, it started with you, and I value first insights, which is true. Vandal Savage debuted in Green Lantern issue number 10, way back in like 1940 in DC Comics. He was one of the very first villains that Alan Scott fought in DC Comics. And keep in mind, as it stands right now, because of events like Doomsday Clock and Dark Crisis and so on, there are no more resets to the continuity because of events that have happened over the course of Crisis on Infinite Earths and Final Crisis and Zero Hour Crisis in Time and Infinite Crisis and so on, New 52. That is all just one complex, large piece of history. DC's continuity is really no different than Marvel at this point. These crisis events had to happen, but the resets aren't really a part of it anymore. And so that's why all this history stays intact, because Alan Scott says, I don't know from any insights, but Savage comes from hunger, centuries of it, millennia even. He survived 50,000 years on this earth, Batman. Think about that, because he thinks about it every single day. Savage knows deep down that he will do anything to survive because he's already done it. And so Batman ponders this and says, survival is what brought him to Gotham. His longevity was failing. He came here hunting 3 relics made of the meteorite that transformed him. He needed to recharge himself. We stopped him, myself and the kids. And so that's where Alan asks, what happened to them, to those 3 relics? And Batman's just kind of like, as so many ancient relics, with the bad luck of finding themselves in Gotham City so often do, they exploded, I guess. And it's like, you don't have to be crazy to live here, but it helps. It's a hilarious moment, right? And so Alan says, but Savage is still here, playing at being Mr. Law and Order instead of off being whatever it is that he does. And so Batman says, dealing with him in the past has always been a team effort when his ambitions were global, galactic, transdimensional even. Seizing Gotham feels too small. And so Alan asks, how did you beat him all those other times? And Batman runs off the methodology of winning, more and better good guys than he had. And Alan Scott says, that's not what I'm asking. That's how you won. My question is, how did you beat him? What happened that led to you defeating him in the first place? And that's when Batman says he would get impatient, sentimental, sloppy. Some little crack in his grand design would let a little light in, and we'd figure him out. And Alan Scott is just kind of like, don't be modest, right? You're the one who did all the figuring. The teams may have done the fighting, but you were the one that figured him out. And so Batman's response, you're saying this is personal. That's why he's here, because it's a personal vendetta against Batman, which makes good sense. Vandal Savage is, again, thousands of years old. His schemes have always been huge. It's one of the reasons why it felt so strange that Vandal Savage would become the commissioner of Gotham City. Of all the grand schemes he would engage in, becoming the commissioner of the Gotham City Police Department, it didn't really make a whole lot of sense when it happened, and even a lot of you guys down in the comments were like, I mean, that feels very small for Vandal Savage, right? It feels very small for him to do something like that. But again, that's what Alan Scott's hitting at here. He's living in your house, Batman. It sounds pretty damn personal to me. Not literally, but he's a police commissioner in the city, right? So metaphorically, he's living in Batman's home. But here's the other important thing that Alan Scott brings up. He says, Gotham is too small for him, but revenge is what sustains him after all these years. Savage thinks on a different timeline than the rest of us. We have to force ourselves to think on a different scale that can be hard to see. He does not wonder where he's eating today, tomorrow, or the day after. He wonders what guy he has to kill to get the field that he'll plant to survive next winter. And it'll turn out that guy's great-great-granddad was rude to Savage once, and he's been stewing on it ever since. When you live for thousands of years, you don't think about life in terms of days or weeks or months. You think about life in terms of centuries, right? You think about life in terms of thousands of years. The memory never goes away. And so that's why Alan Scott says, if survival brought Vandal Savage here, what if it's survival that's keeping him here? What if he can't leave? And since he's trapped in Gotham with the one man who keeps beating him at his own game, what if he decides to beat you at yours? In effect, he's stuck here, and while he's here, might as well make the best of it. Might as well destroy the one man that's always beat him. That's how Vandal Savage thinks. And it's a really cool way to interpret his character in the comics. I love how Fraction handles this. And so when you switch back to Vandal Savage and his conversation with Poison Ivy, he says, I treat those who serve the Gotham City Police Department as solutions to the problem of crime and not impediments to its prosecution. Previous regimes treated the Bat as the answer to lawlessness while whispering his name because he himself is lawless. Those hypocrites tacitly told our police, you are not good enough. I believe the results of treating the Gotham City Police Department as Gotham's finest speak for themselves. Crime has never been lower. People have never felt safer, and our police have never been prouder. Now, that's true to a degree, but only on a limited basis. There is some propaganda going on here. Sure, people feel safer when there's no crime committed, but there's a big difference between that crime not being committed because the price of committing that crime is just being tossed in prison indefinitely, regardless of what crime you commit, and police actually operating in the interests of people, protecting them because people feel like the police care about them. These are two completely different things. They are not the same. And that's where Vandal Savage is at. Seemingly, the police feel almost more like a paramilitary force than traditional police. They are doing some beneficial things, but it's a very fine line that he's walking here. And so that's why he tells Poison Ivy, all I ask is you honor your sworn oath to uphold the laws of Gotham City by permitting me to uphold mine. As your humble servant, all I may offer in return is my loyalty and a pledge. The Gotham City Police Department shall be the army that your reign of radical transformation requires to succeed in any way you require, Madam Mayor. Now, that last little statement right there, in any way you require. Keep in mind, Vandal Savage was caught planting evidence, right, by a kid with a phone. So this is not a guy who's afraid of skirting the law in order to achieve his own goals. That's what's going on here. And so what ends up happening is when you switch over to this last little bit of a conversation between Alan Scott and Batman, you find out that Batman made him pay for coffee. Right? It's kind of a funny little moment here, but they end up going their separate ways. Alan Scott does extend a bit of assistance here and say, like, if you need anything, let me know, right? I'm always here to help you out as best I can. And of course, Batman ends up taking off as Alan Scott grabs the newspaper to see that the city of Gotham has declared war on Batman. And so that's when we pick up with this war itself and all the events that are transpiring as a part of it. Because what goes on here is that you end up finding out the assignment given to Damian Wayne is not really one that Damian likes, and Batman has this conversation with Alfred. Now keep in mind, Alfred's not real. He's been dead for quite some time. It's Batman seeing him, but he communicates with him nonetheless. As kind of an aside here, I wouldn't be surprised if Matt Fraction starts toying with this idea of Batman losing his mind and seeing and talking to Alfred. But for the moment, it's really just kind of the conscience of Bruce made manifest in the only person that was really a father figure for him after his father died. And so that's why Alfred says, the boy seems less than enthused, Master Bruce, and Bruce Wayne just tells him, I don't have time to deal with teenage mood swings tonight, Alfred. And Alfred just says, yes, of course, Master Bruce, especially with managing so many of your own. So it's good to see that with Alfred still being a projection, as he has been in Matt Fraction's run, he's as snarky as ever. Because Bruce turns to him and is like, I beg your pardon. And Alfred just says, come now, right? Your deficiencies as a parent are not his fault. And Bruce says he's an arrogant, entitled kid. But the response of Alfred, Tommy rot, right? He does not know how to fail because you've never modeled that for him, because then you wouldn't be infallible. And Bruce tells him that Batman must be infallible or people die. And this is the beautiful statement of Alfred. The Batman is not Damian's father. Bruce Wayne is Damian's father. And Bruce Wayne is a man just like anybody else, right? He falters, he makes mistakes, he screws up. And you need to make sure Damian sees that. You need to make sure Damian knows that's the kind of man that you can be. Making this kid walk a knife's edge and be perfect all the time, it can create problems. Now, granted, when he's operating as Robin, he needs to be on his best behavior and make sure he does what a superhero is supposed to do. But when the suit comes off and it's just Damian, he needs to know that it's okay to screw up. He needs to know that it's okay to make mistakes because it's the only way you learn. And that's what Alfred tells him, right? Damian made a mistake, and then in your anger, you made a mistake. Show him how you will learn from it. It was Bruce Wayne's response to the frustration of Damian. It was the mistake Damian made when they were on the rooftop and he referred to Bruce as father. We covered that moment in a comic. It was a pretty big cliffhanger. That's the anger that Bruce is talking about. And so he just says, it's hard, Alfred. Raising him is so hard. And Alfred just tells him, right? It puts me in mind of something that Master Jason said when I was faced with some onerous task or another during his upbringing. Nut up, Buttercup. Nobody ever said being a parent was easy, which is true. There's no big book of books on how to be a parent. There's no guidebook. You just do the best you can, hope you don't screw up, and make the best decisions you can along the way. It's not easy. It's tough. And that's what Bruce has to come to terms with. Damian's young, right? I mean, he's a teenager, gonna be going into his 20s, living his life all the while, never asking himself the question, if the world's problems could be so easily solved by a bunch of 20-year-olds, why haven't they been solved yet, right? He feels like he has it all figured out. That's the arrogance that he comes from. And so that's when Bruce approaches him as a father and says, Damian, we're swapping missions. And he gives him a piece of paper. And Damian's like, really? And Bruce is like, yeah, 100%, right? We're swapping missions. And in fact, he's encouraging here. Damian asks, like, do you want to check my work when I'm done? And Bruce is like, no, I trust that you will do the job effectively because I trust you. And so that's when you switch over to where we started at the beginning of this video, right? Everybody going out on their missions. And so Barbara Gordon calls out, right? All points. This is Oracle in the clock tower. This line is scrambled and secure. Check in. And so Duke Thomas, I love that he's being used here, right? It's like signal checking in. Stephanie Brown checks in, and then she asks, where's Tim Drake? Like, it seems like tonight should be all hands on deck. And Damian's just like, he's taking a sabbatical, right? He is in a relationship, which is true. So in Batman issue number 6, one of the things Tim Drake was wrestling with was his relationship with Bernard. And it was the idea that he was hiding so much from his boyfriend and didn't quite feel like that was the right way to do things. And so he ultimately had to make a choice. Does he want his relationship, or does he want to kind of follow the steps of Batman, keeping that part of himself hidden? And ultimately, he chose Bernard, which is a beautiful thing because sometimes life just requires you to put your relationship first. And so that's why he's not really a part of this in the here and now. Whether he comes back, I don't entirely know. I hope so. I love Tim Drake. But the fact is, once people start checking in, that's when Oracle starts giving orders, right? She says, Stephanie, it looks like you're diverting and heading toward the bad guys. Do you see something that I don't? And Stephanie's like, no. Just a couple of cops that I felt like taking out. Okay, heading to where I'm supposed to go, right? Heading to the bunker. And so in the midst of that, the cops are rolling in on Duke Thomas. I mean, they're coming in hardcore. There's like this great big huge ATV that's rolling behind him. And he's like, Oracle, I can't shake these guys, right? I'm gonna have to zap them, see if I can get them to crash into something. And at that point, Oracle's like, no, do not do that. Using your powers will give Savage an excuse to call for a federal response, because then he can make an argument it's an organized militia that's working against the cops. And that gives him all the authority he needs to bring in heavy hitters. And so Duke's like, well, that sucks, at least for me anyway. So he's hauling as best he can. And Barbara says, Signal, cut west as soon as you can. You're about to get cornered. And he's like, no, I'm about to get perforated, right? Robin, how about some of that backup? But he doesn't know about the mission swap between Robin and Bruce. And so Damian just tells him, right? Like, it won't be me. Trust the plan. And so Oracle chimes in and says, backup is incoming, Signal. Batgirl, abort Bunker 12. They got to it before you did. Divert north to Bunker 8. And so at that point, Stephanie's like, damn it, right? So she ends up literally making a turn and swerving off to that bunker, only for us to switch back over to Duke and to find Batman swooping in to rescue him from these cops. And he does exactly that. He snatches up one of the cops, tosses this guy out, and says, they'll be off your tail in 50 meters. Stand by. Which is exactly what happens, because we end up learning one of the things that the Bat family had done is they have installed bollards throughout the city that Batman can operate. They're called Bat bollards, which is dope. And so that's exactly what happens. He activates them, they come flying out of the ground, the truck smashes right into it, and that's the end of them. And so literally Damian Wayne is like, did he use the bollards? And Barbara's like, yeah, he used the bollards. And so Stephanie's like, we have bollards now? And Barbara's like, we had some bollards, yes. Although after tonight, Savage will basically tear up every part of the city in order to find him. And so when Stephanie gets to Bunker 8, she's like, you said Bunker 8, right? Like, there's nothing here. And that's when Barbara realizes it's a trap. The cops had gotten there ahead of time. They raided the joint, took everything, and then waited for Stephanie to show up. It's genius. It's an incredible strategy. That's what you're dealing with when you're facing off against Vandal Savage. But at the same time, Savage is facing off against Batman, along with the combined efforts of Barbara Gordon especially, as well as all the other members of the Bat family. But what's important here is Bruce and Barbara, because everything we've seen here so far is plan A. Then there's plan B. And that's what Batman says. Oracle, I'm 12 minutes out. And she says, I think it's time. And so Batman kind of grunts for a second and says, copy you, Oracle. See you on the other side. And so at that point, she turns off the scrambler and she says, all points, this has been your Oracle in the clock tower. Immediately, the signal is picked up by Vandal Savage, and they're like, all units converge on that signal. And she says, we now conclude your broadcast day, because she's giving it the appearance it's a pirate broadcast that by some form or another, Vandal Savage and his folks have just picked up on. And she says, it's been an honor and privilege to serve with you, and I hope to see you all again soon. Until then, stay smart, stay safe, and stay in the dark. So the cops come rolling up on her, and she says, this is Barbara Gordon signing off. And so when the cops show up, I mean, they've got all their guns trained right on her. And she just says, hello, boys, what took you so long? And so when the rest of the Bat family hears signing off, they immediately pick up on what's going on. Barbara Gordon is allowing herself to be captured by the cops. And that's only the tip of the iceberg, because then you switch over to Damian, and he says, Barbara and I have been talking. And Batman just says, trust the plan, because he's arrived here, right? And that's where you find out Damian's got reservations. Damian doesn't know how he feels about Barbara allowing herself to be caught. But in response to Batman saying, trust the plan, Damian just says, yes, sir, right? He trusts his father. And so Bruce tells him, Damian, I had years to learn how to do this alone, but then there you were, and all of that went out the window. And it's kind of a beautiful moment between the two, because Damian says, I know you didn't want me, and I'm sorry I destroyed everything. But the response of Bruce, none of my plans before you matter, son. You did not destroy anything. You changed things, and I've been racing to catch up. I am sorry that I'm not the father you deserve yet. And he says, but I'm trying to learn, because it's you and me now, and that's all that matters. So push the button. Now, there are some people who would look at this and say that Matt Fraction is retreading Grant Morrison waters. Now, this is kind of played out. The whole story of Batman saying, I'm sorry I'm not the father you deserve, Damian. You know, you deserve a better father than me. And there is merit to that criticism, to be honest, but I think that different writers have their different interpretations of it. And when it comes to someone like Matt Fraction, something to keep in mind, he plays the long game. right? Matt Fraction does not play the short game traditionally. Everything has a much bigger picture if the comic goes on long enough. Not always, but usually. It was that case when you looked at his Iron Man run, starting with the 5 Nightmares. That was the case with his Iron Fist run and the Tournament of the 7 Heavenly Cities. It's always the bigger picture that he's harping on here. And so when Batman talks about pressing the button, what we end up finding out is that the mission of Damian Wayne, which was supposed to be the mission of Bruce, was to attach explosives inside Wayne Manor to blow the whole thing to pieces. Because at that moment, Bruce says, "Let's go home." And Damian says, "Yes, sir," and blows the place to smithereens. And so in that moment, you pick up with a news broadcast, right, where this reporter says, "King News out of Bristol Township this morning with reports of a giant fireball and a possible explosion. A WebG news crew has been dispatched and we will have the report soon. But now we go back to the other breaking news." And you have this reporter who says the courthouse, where the first known associate of the outlawed criminal vigilante Batman has been apprehended. A Gotham City Police Department transport vehicle has arrived, and we are expected to get our first look as the suspect arrives for what's termed a perp walk. That's when a suspect is delivered from police into court custody. The police dubbed this Operation Peregrine and has been described as, quote, "an all-out raid across Gotham City, targeting any known or suspected locations the Batman may have used to conduct his illegal operations, and the seizures of arms, material, and computer equipment believed to belong to the Batman crime family." And he says, "There appears to be some activity happening now. I can see the rear door of the police vehicle is open, and the suspect is emerging." Barbara Gordon, no worse for wear, she's literally had the tar beat out of her in more than a few ways, is being escorted out by the cops. And so this reporter says, this person identified exclusively to this GNN reporter by Police Commissioner Vandal Savage himself is Barbara Gordon, daughter of former Gotham Police Commissioner James Gordon, apprehended this morning in the process of destroying evidence from within a secret base of operations because she torched everything in the clock tower. She literally activated a kill switch that destroyed the computer systems. And it says, Commissioner Savage described the case as open and shut, predicted the suspect would, quote, "be going behind bars very soon and for a very long time." With that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this video to an end. It's phenomenal. Matt Fraction's Batman run is incredible. One of the greatest writers of our time. But hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, drop a like. Thank you all for watching, and I will catch you all later. Peace.